Hey, so I wanted to do this podcast because I feel like I've lived a life and had some experiences that I feel like would help someone else. And I feel like in our culture, the art of storytelling, where young people would sit at the feet of our elders and listen and learn and gain wisdom, has been lost. And so now that I'm a woman of a certain age, I feel like it's partly my responsibility to share some of the things that I've learned. And I hope that through my own reflection, you perhaps might see yourself, or you go on your own journey of self reflection to understand some of the lessons that you've learned through your experiences and perhaps share them with others. So, there are three pivotal experiences that I've had in my life that I feel like really shaped who I am and my character. And so I'm going to share those stories with you. The first would be my experience with my father. My biological father was an amazing dad. I was a daddy's girl. I mean, like anything I wanted, he was going to get it. He would even tell my grandmother, what am I going to do with this girl? If she asks me for it, I'm going to get it. I can't tell her no. So we had that kind of relationship. And my parents separated when I was 2, but I would always go see my dad on the weekends. So he was very much involved. So, I was a daddy's girl. And then probably when I was around 8 years old, my dad got sick and he was in the hospital. And, so I would go see him after school. My mom would take me to go see him. And then this one particular day, my mom was really tired when she got off of work. And I just kept asking her, Mommy, can I go see my dad today? Please, can you take me to go see my dad today? And she was like, we'll go another day. We can go tomorrow. I'm really tired. And I just kept begging her, Mommy, please, 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 can we go? Finally, she's like, okay, I'll take you. So we go. I see my dad. As usual, we're talking, we're playing. And then he's like, I'm starting to get a little tired. So you go home. I'll see you tomorrow. So we go home. I give him a hug and a kiss. We leave. And by the time we arrive home, my mom gets a phone call from my aunt that my dad had passed away. Apparently, shortly after we left, the nurse said that he had got up to go to the restroom, and then after that, he got back in the bed and he had passed away. I'll speak for myself. I've heard about people losing their parents when they were young, and I could never fully really understand what that feels like, of course, because I'm a kid, and I just can't imagine like what it would feel like if my mom or my dad weren't here. But I just remember being devastated. I mean, in school, in church, in the supermarket, at the park, anywhere, I would just bust out and start crying. My mom told me that my dad had died from complications of AIDS. And so I just remember being devastated. Like, I cannot believe that my dad is gone. And I just remember feeling like I don't want to be here anymore. I want to die. I want to go be with my dad. Not really thinking about my mom, but just how much I miss my dad. And so, sometime later, I don't remember exactly how long it had been since my dad passed, but it was still relatively close to the time that he had passed. My aunt came with my 2 cousins, and they came to pick my mom and I up, and we were going to go shopping. And we lived in Reservoir Village by South Orange Avenue in Newark. And we were driving down the street not far from the house, and a car ran a stop sign and hit us. And my mom told me, and I think I need to say this first, that this part of the story, I'm telling it as it was told to me because in the accident I sustained some injuries and I had memory loss, so I don't remember the accident. So my mom told me that as she was turning around to see if I had my seatbelt on, the car had hit us. And she said her shoe had flown off, and once the car we were in had, it spun around, and once it stopped, she turned around to see if everyone was okay. I had an older cousin on one side and a younger cousin on the other side. And she said, everybody said they were okay. And when she looked at me, I was sitting in the middle and I was slumped over in the seat and I wasn't responsive. So my mom, she had worked at UMD, University of Medicine and Dentistry in Newark. And so she told everyone to get up the car and she laid me down in the car and she was still trying to talk to me and I was unresponsive. So she said she slid me out of the back seat onto the sidewalk. And as she laid me down, my eyes rolled in the back of my head and she said I wasn't breathing. So my mom started doing CPR immediately and, someone called 911. And when they got there, they told her that had she not done CPR when she did, that I probably would have been gone by the time they arrived there. So after that, apparently I had sustained 2 hematomas on my brain from hitting my cousins, with the sway of the car. I had one here and one here. I had brain injuries. I was paralyzed on my left side and I was in a coma. And the doctors had told my parents, my mom and my stepdad, that they did not really expect me to come out of this coma, but that if I did, that they should expect for me to be a vegetable. And my parents were like, we don't care. However she comes back, we just want her back. And they said that it was people from my church, from my school, from the neighborhood that had come to the hospital, and they would just come. And they said every time someone walked in, they would just start crying because just the sight of it, is breathing tubes and IVs and just tubes and everything all over. And people would just bust out and start crying. And every day, my stepdad would sing Jesus Keep Me Near the Cross in my ear. And I was in a coma for about a week. And around the time when I was waking up, my mom said, I think my dad was like in the waiting room. My mom had gone to get something to eat. And the nurse was in there and she heard me saying something. So she ran to get my dad and she's like, she's coming out of the coma and she's saying something. And when they came in and kind of kneeled down over me, they said that I was singing Jesus Keep Me Near the Cross. And my mom told me that sometime shortly after I woke up out the coma, that I told her that I had a dream and I went to heaven to see my dad. And so she was like, tell me about the dream. So I said that I was at my grandmother's house who lived on Greenwood Avenue in East Orange. And there were like these little Pac-Mans that came and they were eating the clouds and there was a light. And then I went up into the clouds and I told my mom that I saw my brother Jared, who had passed when he was a baby. I was only 2. I saw my Aunt Josephine, who was my mom's sister that had passed away. And I was telling her how I saw my dad and we were having so much fun and we were playing and I was so happy and he was so happy. And then after some time, he said, I love you, but you have to go back because your mommy misses you. And I said, I don't want to go back. I want to stay here. He said, but you can't. I love you, but you have to go back because your mommy misses you. And so, I was sad because I didn't want to go. He said, I love you and I'll see you again, but you got to go back. And, we hugged, and then I left. And my mom said that she was listening to the story and she's like, okay, it seems like a dream that, a kid could have. But she said, I told her that I also saw my grandma Rose, who was my father's grandmother that passed away before I was even born. So I had never seen this woman ever, not a picture or nothing. And my mom said that I described her to a T. And it was at that moment that my mom was like, you went somewhere. And, during the time that after I woke up out the coma, I had to wear a helmet because I had a brain injury in case I fell to protect my head. I was on seizure medication because I would have seizures from the brain injury. Due to my paralysis, I had to learn how to walk and talk again because when I woke up out the coma, I reverted back to a 2-year-old. So my speech was that of a 2-year-old. So I had to go through rehabilitation. I was in the hospital probably for about 3 months. I went from UMD trauma unit to United Hospital to Children's Specialized Hospital in Mountainside, and that's where I did a lot of my rehabilitation. And I remember my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Bone, she did not want me to fall behind, so she volunteered on her own time to come to the hospital to tutor me. And I would always go to the Ronald McDonald phone and I would call my mom and she would say, I'm going to come see you. Do you want me to bring you something? And I would always say, I want a cheeseburger Happy Meal from McDonald's and books because I always loved to read. And my mom would bring me books and I was in the room with 2 other girls who had cerebral palsy. And even though I was young, I could remember feeling grateful that I could get up out of bed and I could walk to the bathroom, albeit slow. I could walk to the bathroom on my own. I think now, in retrospect, that I never shared that story with anyone because I was always concerned about, what people would think. But now in this space, I'm confident in saying that, something that existed on this plane also existed in another. And I'm sure of that. It really made me feel like through all of that, God spared my life for a reason. Because to know me today, you would never know that I sustained any of the injuries that I did or had any of the experiences as a result of that accident that I had. And I just carried it with me through high school and college and adulthood. And I really felt like my life had a purpose. At the time, I didn't know what it was. And now I feel like I do. So I'm sharing this story with you. The second pivotal experience in my life would have to be having spinal surgery where I would have to have 2 rods down my spinal column. And so how, I don't think they do it now. It may be a little bit different. And perhaps I'm dating myself a little bit. But in school, they used to do the screenings where they would check your hearing and your vision. And they would do like a little test on your back for scoliosis. So at this point, post hospital, I'm back in school, regular routine checkup that they do in school. In this particular time, they say to my parents, you may want to have her checked out, see a specialist, because it seems like she has a certain curvature of her spine based on our assessment. So, you want to take her to go get a second opinion. So we go see a specialist, and they tell my parents that I have like a 20-degree curvature of my spine. I believe that's what it is. I don't know. But my spine is kind of looking like a S. And to remedy that, because I was young, they were like suggesting a brace. So I had a brace that would come from like right under my breast to slightly past my hips, and I'll have to wear the brace for 16 hours a day. And I was like, I am not wearing this thing to school because kids are gonna laugh at me, and the way it makes you sit, you're up like this, and I was just like, I'm not doing that, and it was uncomfortable too. So my parents were like, is it possible that she can wear it when she comes home, until she gets ready to go to school? And the doctor, he was like, that's fine. So I wore that for some time. And then eventually I outgrew the brace. And I was saying to my mom, I something is wrong, because I feel like my ribs are going into my side and I can't really breathe good. So my mom took me back, and this time the doctor was saying, yeah, because of the curvature, she's not wearing a brace anymore because it was too small. Her ribs are starting to turn into her lungs, so it's making it more difficult for her to breathe. If you don't do something now, over time, what could eventually happen is it could get worse, and she could be hunched over, or she may not be able to walk. And I remember my parents saying that's not a decision they wanted to make, to have surgery, only because of, there was a 1% chance that they hit something wrong and I could be paralyzed anyway. And so it was like, if you don't do anything, you could be at risk of not being able to walk. If you do have the surgery and there is the slightest error, I could be paralyzed and not be able to walk. So my parents was like, we could not make that decision. Around this time, I was in high school. It's like I was going into my junior year of high school. And I can remember asking the doctor questions like, you know, would I be able to have children? Would I be able to carry a baby? And, what is the scar going to look like? Because they literally cut my back open like a book. And, just thinking, nobody's going to want me. It's going to be so ugly. I'm going to have this scar. I thought I was going to say the most humiliating time of my life. But I don't know if that's the right word just yet. I would say humbling. Because once I was in the bed, I couldn't turn myself the way, you get in the bed, you turn one side, you turn to the other side. I didn't have the liberty to move my body myself. So if I felt like I was in a position for too long, I would have to call my parents, who, if it's the middle of the night, they have to wake up. Both of them would have to come, and they would have to pull the sheets so that I could roll over. And because of the incision on my back, and I had staples, it would pus. And so I could only wear white t-shirts, and the t-shirts would get stuck to my back. So now I have to have them pull the t-shirts off slowly so that I could change it, because now that one is soiled with pus. And again, I have to lift my arms and do all this movement that is excruciating. I also can't get up and go to the bathroom by myself. So now, again, at this point, my parents are back at work, so they will alternate weeks of being home with me. They have to help me go to the bathroom. But not only that, they have to wipe me because I can't move and turn my body to reach and wipe myself. So with my mom, it was kind of okay because, that's your mom. But with my dad, I know that it was as awkward and uncomfortable for him as it was for me to have my dad have to wipe me at 16 years old because I couldn't do it myself. I still remember that. And that part we don't talk about, but I have such an appreciation for my parents because they did it without ever complaining or making me feel uncomfortable. But my mom at some point was like, oh no, you're going to get your butt out this bed and you're going to walk down the stairs. And I'm like, Mike. So my mom was definitely like, nope, at some point you got to get up, you got to move, you can't. And so I started to be able to move around more. It went from me scooting down those 17 steps to I could walk down the steps, 1 foot down, the next foot down on one step, and do that again until I got down, until I was able to slowly move around by myself. That experience taught me so much about how much we take for granted. You get up in the morning, you don't think about, your brain telling your legs to move and turn and put your feet on the floor. You just do it. I can remember having to talk to myself. Okay, Aleia, swing your leg off the bed. Then swing your other leg around and put your arm under you so you can push yourself up. I remember having to literally talk to myself to tell myself, this is what we have to do to sit up. Not even stand up, just to sit up in the bed. You don't think about those things until being in the unfortunate situation of not having those abilities. So it really taught me about, how thankful I am for the smallest of things. From once being paralyzed and I couldn't do this, to having surgery and I couldn't move my body, I couldn't move my limbs. I have such an appreciation for the smallest of things now. It also helped me to see how much my parents absolutely loved me. Because, you hear it and you think, oh yeah, they're my parents, so they have to love me. That really showed me how much they loved me. The sacrifices that they made for me. What it also taught me is not only how resilient the body is, but how powerful the mind is. Because when my body was telling me I can't do this, my mind was saying, we will do this. And I think the last and perhaps most important thing that I learned from that situation is that I can do hard things. The third pivotal experience that I've had that really shaped who I am is becoming a wife and a mother. So my mom and my biological father separated when I was 2. And my mom started dating my stepdad, who I now affectionately refer to as my dad. It's no stepdad, that's my dad. But for the sake of the story, to make the distinction, I said stepdad. I remember him telling me when he first met me and my brother. I was 2. He walked in and it was paper all over the floor. And he said, I opened the door and I was looking around. And I said, "You guys clean this paper up." And he said, "Both of y'all stopped." And he said, "You looked at me like, well, who are you?" And he said, "I said to you guys, y'all clean this paper up. You got all this paper on the floor. Your mom's not going to be happy about this." And he said, at 2, I might have been 2.5, I walked over to him and I said, "Well, why do I have to clean up the paper when he was throwing it at me?" And he said, I was really taken back by that. He said, because I'm like, who is this little girl? Again, she's only like 2.5 years old, and her ability to reason and her logic. He was like, I really felt like, let me pay attention to this a little bit more. He said, I still made you clean it up, but that made me pay attention to who you are. And, from that point on, he said, I would always have these mini adult conversations, or I would write these short stories. And he said it was always, a kid's story, but what I always noticed was it always had a beginning, a middle, and an end. He said, so you've always been a really good storyteller. And, up till now, my dad and I, we still have these, we call them kitchen table conversations. And I never really understood, and sometimes I feel like I still am learning, what it takes to be a good parent. I grew up in a big family. My grandmother had 11 kids, so I have something like 40 plus first cousins, and we're all pretty close. So I always knew like I wanted to have a family. That experience coupled with, you can feel however you want about Bill Cosby, but Heathcliff Huxtable really shaped my life and was a big influence. So much so that, from the time I was 9 till I went to college, I said I was going to be a doctor. I was going to be an obstetrician gynecologist. I was a pre-med student, did all the bio. I was in until I got to organic chemistry. And then that was the one that was like, well, maybe I'm not going to, But just the family dynamic of that show made me feel like that's what I want. I want that. I knew my husband since I was 16 years old. We were working at Sears on Route 22 together. And he was always really nice, really sweet. And we only got like 30 minutes for lunch. And there was this little like luncheonette place in there. So he would always come up and ask if he could, have lunch with me. And by the time we ordered the food, waited for it to be made, sat down and ate, we was running out of there with like 5 minutes to spare. So we never really had that much time. So, we would see each other at work and talk, and, he was cool. And then I went to high school. I went to a separate high school than the town that I lived in where he went. So we kind of lost touch. And I graduated and went to college. And I was friends with this guy, and he came to see me. We were just friends. And he started liking my neighbor. So he wanted to continue to come over. And he was like, I'm going to come over and I'm going to bring my cousin. And I'm like, I don't know about that. He's like, no, 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 he's cool. So I lived in a 4 apartment duplex. So I was like, all right, bring him when you come see my friend, who my neighbor, and I'll just go to her house. And he wasn't gonna know that I lived next door on the other side. And when he comes, he brings his cousin, and I'm like, I know him. My husband's name is Brian. So I'm like, I know Brian. And so, we're cool. We're hanging out. I'm beating him in the Wii bowling because, it was just a fun time. And, then again, he was kind of like, I like you. At that time, I was, sometimes women can do. My husband, he's not a flashy guy. Very nice, not flashy. And, at that point, I'm in college and I think I'm with the guy that's flashy and, all of that. So I'm like, oh, he's nice, but we could just be friends. So again, we kind of lost contact. And then, so I'm living my life, I'm traveling. And at some point, I would see like when I would travel, I would post like, about my excursions, and he would, like it. He wouldn't comment too much, but he would just be liking my stuff. So, I'm scrolling through Facebook and I see his picture and I'm like, Brian looking kind of cute. Let me see what's going on with Brian. So, I send him a message like, hey, what's going on? It would be really good to catch up. How are you? And he's like, oh, I'm so happy you text me, and I would love to get together and have lunch. And then he was like, how about I do one better? How about I make you breakfast? And I was like, I like to eat breakfast. And he was like, okay. So he was like, I'll go to the supermarket and I'll grab a couple things and, I'll come over for breakfast. So I'm like, all right, cool. And so we had made plans for him to come the next day. So I'm thinking he's going to come like 10, 11. It'll be like a brunch type thing. So I get a call at like 7 o'clock in the morning. And it's Brian. So I'm like, hey, how you doing? I'm thinking, he's calling to say, ask me, is there anything in particular that you want? I'm getting ready to make a store run. He's like, hey, you still want that breakfast in bed, right? I'm like, yeah, of course. He's like, all right, good. I'm downstairs. I'm like, oh my God. So now I'm trying to like not be overdone, but I'm like trying to hurry up and brush my teeth and fix my hair a little bit, put something on, but I don't want to look like I plan too much. And he made this amazing breakfast. I had breakfast in bed and we just hung out. And I remember him saying, like, I feel like I messed up the opportunity before, but I'm not going to do it again. And so I'm like, okay, whatever. I don't see no ring on my finger, but I hear you talking. He's like, okay, I'll show you. And, still the same sweet guy that I remember. And I remember it was Christmas. And, that's when the mannequin challenge, where everybody would stop and the camera would pan across and people would be frozen like mannequins. We're at my aunt's house, and I should have known something was up because my parents were there. And normally if my parents are not going to church, they're not going anywhere for New Year's, and they were out. And I had attributed that to the fact that my dad had two illnesses. I'll just say he had 2 aneurysms, but that'll be for another story. And perhaps just, with all of that, he wanted to be out and around his family. So I'm like, all right, cool. So it's my aunt, my uncle, my mom, my dad, me, Brian, and my cousin and his wife. And, they're rushing back because they went to go drop the kids off. They're rushing back. Wait for us to do the mannequin challenge. And so they come back and we're doing it. And the first time I stop and I'm looking at my aunt and I just bust out laughing. So I messed it up. So I'm like, all right, this time we're going to do it over. But this time I'm going to keep my eyes closed so that I don't have to look at anybody and I don't laugh. So we do it again. And, whatever, I stop. And my cousin is like, wait. And I'm hearing shuffling, but I'm thinking that's him moving around to kind of get everybody. So then he's like, all right, open your eyes. And then when I open my eyes, I look and Brian is standing there. Well, he's on his knees with a ring. And I remember kind of just like looking around like, what the heck is happening? You know how like in the movies where it might be like where everything kind of just goes into slow motion or things stop and then it's just the one person that's talking while everything is frozen? That's how it felt like. It felt like time stood still. I could hear the TV and I saw Brian talking. I saw his mouth moving. I cannot tell you a single word that man said. And I just remember looking around like, oh my God, what is this real? And then I heard the last part of marry me. And I'm looking around like, oh my God, what did he say? And I'm looking like, oh my God, that's a ring. Oh my God, that stone is blue just like I wanted. And then I hear my mom say something, girl. And that snapped me out. And I'm like, and everybody shouting and happy. And I'm like, holy crap. I just got engaged. And then I'm thinking, shoot, my hair is not done. My nails look busted. And now I got to take a picture of my... Yeah. So I always knew that marriage is hard work because my parents have been married for now probably 32 years. They've been together for 39. For part of it, I grew up with them, so I saw the hard. And then for the other part, after I went to college and moved, and I missed that part, but then being in a relationship myself, I'm experiencing my own set of hard, if you will. And then couple that with being a mom. I was just having this conversation recently. I think that for myself, I was the only girl and I was the baby. So I never really had to share. And my brothers were older. So it's almost like I grew up like an only child because in my house, my dad, because I was the girl, now I'm talking about my stepdad, but my dad spoiled daddy's girl all over again. So that was my experience. And then, having kids is like, I don't even know if I could really put into words how different it is. If you have children, then, I think you may be understanding a bit of what I'm saying. But that was like, it was so life-changing for me because it's like, what? Now it's not, I'm not on my own time. I'm having to make sacrifices that I didn't even imagine that I would have to make. Because even as a wife, sometimes I have the liberty to say, well, no, dear, I don't want to do that. With children, it's not about what you feel like you want to do. This is what needs to be done. I'm going to share more stories about lessons that I've learned as a wife and as a mother. But I think those two things have really stretched me and forced me to grow and mature in so many ways. There's this vision that I had of how I would be as a wife and a mother. And now that I'm actually sitting in the seat, it's the reality of what it means for me to be a wife and a mother. What I'm learning is that I'll say parenthood is one of the easiest things to get in. And I think so many people do it because it's easy without really understanding all of what it takes. And even for marriage, I will say that parenthood and marriage are those things that you never really understand what it takes to be successful until you're sitting in the seat. And it might be at that point that you're like, I don't know if this is really what I wanted to do, because this is a lot of work. It's more than what I thought it would be. So I really want to share a lot more of those stories just because I've had a lot of revelations, and I feel like now is a good time to give a disclaimer that I talked to my husband about this, so he knows that I'm going to be sharing certain aspects of our marriage and my lived experience. And the final thought would be seeking counsel from wisdom helps you to move further without having to repeat mistakes that others have already made and learned from and can share with you. I've always been really comfortable with learning from others' mistakes rather than making my own, or I'll make new mistakes but not repeat somebody else's. So that has been really helpful in guiding me in how I want to show up as a wife and how I want to also show up as a mom. Both are hard, but I am so appreciative to be blessed to sit in the seat and to be able to learn and to be able to share. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend. And I hope you will return for more.